CoS of Strahd.
Hello and well met. This is Layron with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today I'm going to take a look at the Curse of Strahd, being that it's Halloween right around the corner. Tomorrow, as a matter of fact. Happy early Halloween. I had a one-shot set up to run yesterday, but it didn't work out properly. I lost power. I'm not going to go into the reasons why that happened, but nonetheless, I was not able to run my game. I'm pretty bummed out. I put a lot of work into it, and I did a lot of custom stuff, so I thought I'd share a little bit of that with you guys today, so it's not a complete waste. And also, I'd like to touch on the Curse of Strahd and some of the elements that you might use to help with immersion and to help with your storytelling and that sort of thing. So without further ado, I have the latest and greatest version of Fantasy Grounds. I am using the DnD5e rule set. Some of the things I'm showing you can be applied to other rule sets, such as Pathfinder, Cthulhu, whatever storytelling medium you're going to use. I look at Fantasy Grounds as a whole as opposed to separate pieces. When I first started Fantasy Grounds, I kind of always looked at it through the lens of 5th edition, but now that I've matured in my knowledge of the platform, I'm starting to realize more and more over time that is just really a good tool to present a story. Now, how you do that and what tools you have and the rule set that you own is kind of up to you, like how you want to make that work. I'm using 5th edition because I'm more familiar with it. I have assets for it. I have lots of content. I would like to share some of that with you and kind of give you some hope and tips and maybe some examples of some of the things you can do with the platform. So for the time being, in the background, I am playing some music that comes from Sirenscape. So some people don't like to pay for an additional subscription, or they don't think it's worth the value. I don't use it enough, but I do use it enough to justify paying for it. I do play around with it. It kind of helps me get in the mood of playing, and it also kind of adds to the ambiance of whatever you're trying to do in regards to telling a story. So in this case, it'd be like a horror story, and the Curse of Strahd is obviously that. It starts off in the Death House. I'd done some previous videos a month or two ago where I was setting up a map for the Death House, and I was also setting up some of the assets that I wanted to use for that particular adventure. I actually was going to run that as a one-shot, but it's really not a one-shot design. It's really probably made to be ran in maybe 2 or 3 sessions, depending on how your party's set up and the level you start at and those sort of things. But just wanted to talk a little bit about content. So in the modules section here, I just have some of Rob 2E's effects coding modules loaded. These are just automation that can be added to your character sheets, or you can add these to your actions tab, like your equipment, for instance. So if you have equipment on your character sheet that can actually apply some sort of action or any kind of automation, so that would be added here. So in this case, this character has candles and a potion of invisibility. So normally you would have to set these up yourself, or your GM would have to do this for you. But if you have these modules, you can drag these items onto your character sheet. And if you have the Mad Nomad extension, which works hand in hand with these modules, it'll put them on for you. But regardless, they're stored in the spells area, and if you filter this out to whatever the effects are that you're trying to go for it could be potions, it could be weapons. So anything that can have some sort of automation or automatic effects or whatever that you want to put on your items and use in your game to make it a little easier on the GM, you can drag these over onto your sheet, and then when your player uses them, they can activate them, such as this candle. There's an effect on here for that. And then there's another effect if you want to use it like a weapon. So there's different kinds of things that will be added to your sheet, or that you can add to your sheet depending on what your sheet contains. So we have a bard here. So if I click on his character sheet and open up the actions tab, he has all his standard actions, which comes from the Rob 2E effects automation modules. and then it was pulled over by the Mad Nomads extensions automatically based on what I was building. But you can also manually do it. Here's all his bard related stuff like Jack of all trades, cutting word, song of rest, and to track his bardic inspiration. Then he has his elf ancestry thing, so he has this Fey ancestry. And then here it added the lamp and then the oil in case you want to use it as a weapon. So the lamp will give you the effect of a lantern that you're carrying around, and the oil, you can actually throw it, apply damage, and then there's the attack roll and the effect. So this is basically a way to kind of automate some of the things on your sheets. Now this isn't required. You can do all this stuff manually. I'm just showing you some of the content that I have loaded. So those are just things that kind of enhance the gameplay, gives you quality of life, and makes it a little easier, streamlined to kind of play. But you kind of have to understand how it works with Fantasy Grounds and when and why to use them. So that takes time. The other thing I have loaded in here, I have the Curse of Strahd, and then I have Van Richten's House of Lament. So if you've never played with Van Richten, there's an adventure in there. It came with some maps, but they weren't that great. And I believe that Josh Watmal had actually created some maps for it. So the House of Lament comes with Van Richten's guide. And if you go into the images for that particular module, and then you search through here, you'll find some maps here. So this is the House of Lament map, and I believe that Josh actually recreated these, if I remember right, because the ones that came with it weren't as nice, I guess, or something like that. I think he recreated these with the assets from Fantasy Grounds. I'm not sure how that came about, but yeah, it has a logo on here. So I think that he recreated the maps for the House of Lament to make it more conducive to playing with a virtual tabletop, because quite often you have modules and such from like Wizards of the Coast where the product is made for pen and paper, for printing, for miniatures, but not necessarily for virtual tabletop. So quite often those maps are not square. They're not scaled for using in a virtual tabletop. Quite often they're too large, and Smiteworks has to adapt those quite a bit. So that has a lot to do with the way that the maps are put together. So this is the original map for the House of Lament. So what I think happened here is that Josh had taken like this basement, for example, and he made his own version of that so that it looks nicer. Yeah, this looks a little bit nicer than what was presented before. I believe they were black and white. I don't remember, but I know he changed something. So this is just an example of the type of stuff that you'll get in Fantasy Grounds. And being that this is horror-based, it's kind of nice to have these assets, even if you're not playing this adventure and you're going to be running a horror adventure. It's nice to have these assets available to you if you need to present them. So like if you're using a ghoul, it'd be nice to have this particular adventure if you didn't have like the monster manual, for example. This would be nice to have those available to you so you could show these to your players, or you can construct them and build them into some sort of scene that you want to make in Fantasy Grounds. So if you do own the monster manual, so which I do, I'm going to open up the monster manual, and it's right here. And I'm going to take a look at the ghoul that comes out of the monster manual. So I'm going to go to NPCs, the images, and I want to see the actual ghoul in the player's handbook. The one I just showed you came out of the House of Lament, which is a separate adventure setting. So let's look at ghoul. So here's the other ghoul, and then let's look at this one. So the difference here is that I believe that Doug has taken the background out of these so that you can use these assets in a picture or in a scene easier, so you don't have to cut out this background area. So this ghoul comes out of the House of Lament for Van Richten's guide, and then this one is set up around the monster manual. So Smiteworks has gone back and cut out a lot of this background art. So I want to see if I can use this in a scene, if I wanted to create a scene with a ghoul. So rather than creating a whole map and all that sort of thing, I'm going to start with a blank canvas, and then just kind of build a little bit of a 2D kind, or so some sort of scene to kind of give the immersion, but also to give you the idea that you don't need to necessarily have a tactical battle map every time. Just depends on the situation. So I want to go ahead and grab an image that's blank. So I go to images. I'm going to create a new image, but always when I make my own content, just as a rule of thumb, I'll make my own group. So rather than just making it, I'm going to filter it to horror one shot, because that's basically all the work that I've done on the other work that I'd done for my adventure. But I'm going to go ahead and just put it here. I'm just going to put the ghoul image in here. So I filter to that group. Go ahead and click the add item. And now I'm just going to create something out of nothing back here. So if you take an image like this ghoul and you go to your assets, and then you go to images, and then maybe into data, because I don't remember which folder these are, but I'm gonna type in ghoul and see what I get. One nice thing about the assets that has improved a little is the speed in which it searches is a lot quicker now, and the fact that it saves where you were last looking at. So in other words, if I close this and I bring it back up, it'll stay here instead of resetting every time. That was annoying. So they've changed that. So if I come through here, yeah, so there's a lot of ghouls here. These must come from different sources all throughout the content that I have. So if I find the one that Doug did that has no background, you can use that to help embellish your images and to make it so it's a lot more usable for your content. So like here's a ghoul right here. There's one that has this ghoul feasting on an arm. Here's this one that it has the white background still. But then you also have these other ones that don't have the background, that you can actually use these and not have to worry about that. So if I grab one of these ones where the background is taken out, you have a kind of a blank slate where you can use that as sort of your premise for your map. And then what you could do is go ahead and put a grid on it, even though it's not really a battle map. Maybe I'll make them bigger or smaller, I don't know. It just depends on what you need to do. And then this thing, if I want it to be a little bit bigger, I can change the size. I'll just drag this out, kind of make it like that. And then if you want to, you can put effects on it. You can do whatever you want. But what's nice about this is you'll have a place to do your combat if you need to. And then you kind of have this background image to kind of make things neater. So I'm going to find a kind of a background to make it a little bit more pleasant on the eyes. And I'm going to give it a name. So I'll just say, encounter, because I want to kind of give it a prefix. And then I'll say ghoul, and then I'll just put 01 so I have a title here. And then over here on the right will be what the players see, and I'll say ghoul just for the sake of it. Now this way it has a title, and the players will just see this instead of the whole title, because it might say boss encounter or something like that. You don't want them to see that. And then if I wanted to grab more assets, like maybe I want more of a background instead of this kind of whiteness, because if I close this and I actually turn on the line of sight and such, this is kind of what it looks like without any lighting and such. So this is kind of what the players would see. But if you want it to be a little bit more noticeable, you can put light effects on it and that sort of thing. But this is essentially what you're getting, and you can drag and drop your players onto the map, and then have the ghoul on the other side and just battle back and forth like that, just so you have something to target and that you have it kind of digitally represented. And it's still kind of like a combo of theater of the mind and then a little bit of tactics, because then you can see who's close and who isn't, that sort of thing. And this is kind of how the narrative software works, or the platforms work with role-playing games. So that's just an example. So this is just a way that you can use your assets and not get overly complicated when it comes to running content in Fantasy Grounds. So this is just a way to do that. And then if you had a ghoul encounter, you could set that up too and just pin it to this image and then use this later on in your adventure when it comes to this point. So maybe there's a spot where they come through a doorway, there's a ghoul waiting there for them, or maybe more than one ghoul, just depends. So I will go and try to find or make an encounter to put here. So here's some NPCs. I'm going to look for ghoul. There's several. Here's the one from Van Richten's. Here's for ones from the Curse of Strahd. I'll just use that one. And then what I'll do is I will take and put this into an encounter. So what's kind of neat about Fantasy Grounds is you can kind of do your own thing. You don't always have to use what's in the adventure or the module. So it's kind of what I'm doing right now, is sort of embellishing and adding to whatever it is that I'm playing or working with. So when you make an encounter, essentially you're just kind of creating your own little list of actors that you're going to use to fight in a battle. So what I'm going to do is click this green plus button. I'm in the encounters area. But instead of making it a standard encounter with a set amount of NPCs, I'm going to make it kind of random, and in the sense that it's going to not be set. The number is not going to be set not set in glue, basically. So what I'm going to do is add an item. So I'm in random encounters, and I'm going to say ghoul attack, and we don't know how many there are going to be in players, and we don't necessarily know or want to set any sort of amount for the ghoul. So what I'm going to do is take the ghoul, put it in here as part of the encounter. Now you could put 1d4, you could put 1d4 plus 1, you could do whatever you want. What I'm going to do is put in the formula, which works off of the party sheet. So it doesn't work with the combat tracker, but it works with the party sheet. Okay, it goes on whatever's on here. So it doesn't count NPCs, companions, any of that stuff. It's only the players. So I have 1, 2, 3. So I got 5 players. So I don't want any more ghouls than there are players necessarily to balance the encounter. Now it doesn't know anything about total party level or average party level. It doesn't know anything about the CR level of the monsters. However, if you've already kind of set it for a certain level range, you can kind of ballpark it here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say the number of PCs. So it's $PC. Okay, that's your main formula. So what that does is it tells Fantasy Grounds to look at the party sheet. It's going to calculate based off of that. So the number of PCs will determine how many ghouls there are. So I'm going to say -1 or -1, and that's it. So what will happen is I'm going to go ahead and link this to the encounter area. And when we get to this point, or when I want to run this part, I'll pop this up. I'm going to hit generate, and it should only do 4. So it did 1 less than the party members. So the value in that is 1, it's not static, like you don't always have the same range, or you don't always have a certain amount. You don't have to make as many adjustments. And it gives it a higher replay value. So if I run the same encounter for different people at different times, this will help with that, because it will adjust according to the number of players, provided that you put them on the party sheet. So you can do this with other types of math too. It doesn't always have to be adding, subtracting. It'll also handle multiplication, division, not percentage, but decimals. So whatever you want to do. If it rounds off to an uneven number, like half the number of, let's say you do the number of PCs /2. Okay, so there's 5 here. It's probably only going to give me 2. It rounds down. So if I click generate, it's going to say, 2.5, but it's really only 2. So if that's the case, all you have to do is adjust this, change that to 2, and then you can go from there. And then you just recalculate your XP by hitting this little swoosh. And at that point, you hit the down arrow. They're on the combat tracker now. And then I'll take these guys with this mask here, and I'll put them over here. and they're ready to go for the combat. Now, they're still not visible, but they are on the battle map ready to go. So that's not too bad if you have that set ahead of time. And then this way, if you run this again and I have less players, it will adjust accordingly. If I only had like 3 or 4 players, it might only just be 1. So you can kind of decide how you want it to scale based on the number of player characters. Like I said, it doesn't have the logic or the ability to calculate the average party level or the CR values of the monsters. It's only strictly quantity. So if you've already kind of chose monsters that are level appropriate for the range you're going to be playing in, that should work pretty well. I could see this working really well with organized play, such as Adventures League or Pathfinder Society, that sort of thing, where you're going to be running similar modules over and over and over. Now, if you're only doing a one-shot and you're just kind of winging it, you probably don't need to do this. However, if it's a one-shot that you plan on running every convention or, let's say 3 years in a row or something like that, this might come in handy for that. So this is just like one of the cool things, kind of a hidden feature. It is mentioned in the Atlassian, but it doesn't come up very often, and I don't know if people really use it because it depends on your use case and what you're trying to do in your games and that sort of thing. But if you're going to run the same adventure or the same encounter over and over, I could see where this would be helpful. So this is just a way to use your assets strategically and to use the power of the platform to help you as a game master. There are some other features in this particular rule set and in Fantasy Grounds that is really powerful, such as the story generator. So if you create, let's go with, we're going to go to the stories. And as you know, most of the stories of the new modules that are coming out are shifting over to this module view in, let's say, CoS of Strahd. You're going to get this reference manual instead. So if you have an older module, you'll have both the story templates and you'll have this as well. So in the CoS of Strahd, it actually has the story entries here that match the reference manual. But anything newer, like within the last year, all of that stuff is now shifted over to the reference manual. So you won't necessarily have story entries for every single module that you possess. So that has evolved and changed since last summer, I believe. And then if you use this drop down, this group, you can select chapters and stuff through this, or you can use the reference manual if it's set up that way. But in this case, there's both. But you don't always find that. So if I make my own story entry, let's say here's my Halloween one-shot thing that I had. I'm going to go ahead and click on template. And what you have is a basic group of templates that you can use to create content. You have the CoS of Strahd has random encounters for the road, random encounters for the wilderness. The Van Richten's Guide has ghost stories, gothic horror template. It has dark fantasy template, customized unspeakable horror, cosmic horror. It has the body horror and ambient haunts. So you have a lot of tools here to kind of make your own stuff up with a click of a button. So I want to go ahead and grab, let's go with just a basic dark fantasy template. So that comes from Van Richten's Guide. So if you have that book loaded, you'll have these story templates. So if you bring this up, this gives you a template. And what you're going to do is kind of build your framework for your one-shot or whatever your story event is. And what's nice is it's kind of themed for the setting and for the environment, so it doesn't go too far out as far as what it's not going to give you necessarily give you anything that's out of context. So that's kind of nice. So I'm going to go ahead and hit generate, and in doing so, it gives me this story framework to work from. So now I have the ability to go in and I can just kind of build off of this idea. So if you have writer's block or you're not sure where to start, those are nice little templates. So the party's goal is to retrieve a stolen item hidden in a dungeon. It's beneath a temple. The creator of the temple, including Drow potentially, are elves. The main purpose was that it was a mine of some sort initially. It was conquered by some invaders long ago. There's an aberration bent on corruption or domination. That's the main villain. The villain's scheme is magical in nature. It wants to build a construct or a magical device. Perhaps it's using that stolen item to fuel it. There's a method of his madness, so he does torture and branding. So if he captures you, he puts a tattoo or a mark on you. The villain is weakened in the presence of a particular artifact, so maybe there's an anti-artifact somewhere in the story. The villain could be posing as an ally or a friend. Your adventure patron would be a respected elder, might be someone who can tell you a little bit about the history of it, maybe provide you with resources. For the location, you can fill that in later. The adventure introduction. A stranger approaches the character in a tavern and urges them toward the adventure location. So that's just a way to get it started. The climax is when the villain or 2 or 3 lieutenants perform separate rites in a large room. The adventurers must disrupt all the rites at the same time. So it could be like a big ritual, grand conjunction, something like that. The framing event is the arrival of a caravan or a ship. So that may have kick off the adventure, or maybe because of that, this thing set in motion. Possible complications. So there's a moral quandary where there's a respect gained or lost in here. The plot twist is you completing the goal secretly helps the villain, which you may not know until it's too late. And then some side quest is you're going to slay a specific monster, perhaps in pursuit of the artifact that goes against your villain. And then you find a specific item rumored to be in the area, which might be related to the quest, or maybe somebody who had gone before that had lost something, and his allies or wife or someone wants to retrieve that. So it really depends on how you want to do that. But this is just one framework that you can use to help create your own stories. So these are stored in the story entry area, and you have to have like the monster manual, or the content loaded in order to get these templates. And then once you click on templates, you're going to have these varieties depending on what you have loaded. So the more official content you have loaded, the more of the stuff there is. You can build your own. It's a very powerful tool. There's a lot of things you can do. You can reference other tables. It's endless. You can kind of make your own story, entire adventure almost out of that. You just have to still build your artwork and your counters and stuff, but it will kind of do some of that for you. So let's pick something else. So that was just a template for a generic kind of horror story. Let's go with folk horror, gothic. Okay, so here's a wilderness road encounter. Okay, so this is a template for creating a random, kind of semi-random encounter on the road. So we'll hit generate, and here's your outline. So it says it happens in the day. No encounters happen, but if they do, you're going to run into some Barovian scouts, and it gives you part of this adventure. It pulls out part of the adventure in the book to give you some stat blocks and some information. And then no encounter happens at night, but if it does, you have berserkers, so it brings up another part in the adventure that might come in handy. And then the Vistani, if it's in the day, does it happen? No, but if it's at night, or if the encounter does happen, you have some dire wolves. And then at night with the Vistani, if it does happen, there's a ghost. So there's some basic templates that gives you either a pre-generated thing where it pulls up the encounter from another quest or part of the original quest, or it can create its own, depending on how it's set up. So this one's kind of based off of the actual adventure in the Van Richten's guide. So this kind of pulls on some generic encounters that are set up in there. And you could do this yourself. You can totally build on this. I can't go into a tutorial on how that works. There are videos. It's called Story Template Pro. It was about over a year ago. The guy that helped make this a little bit more powerful did a video on how this stuff ties together and how it works. You can do some really, really interesting thing. Like these brackets here reference other tables, and you can have tables that reference other parts of other tables. It can be very complex. But this is just another thing you can do with Fantasy Grounds as a storyteller or as a person who owns the content. and create your own stuff based off the world that you're already in. So it's kind of a cool thing. Not all the books contain templates. A lot of them do, but not all of them. I don't know which ones exactly do and don't. You'll have to load them and see, but you're going to find those in the story area under templates. And if you don't have any content loaded or you don't have the official books, you won't have access to those templates, but you can make your own. So it depends on your needs. So here's some item that I got off the DM's Guild, and it's called 100 Books to Find in a Ravenloft Bookshelf. Now, it doesn't sound all that particularly good, but if it's got a story entry, and then on here is the introduction, where it tells you about what this is for. So the books can be an important source of knowledge. They often contain needed or valuable information for clues, or they may have value as treasure. There are other books that are less valuable. They may be sensationalist fabrications, dated, or of a dubious, if any, accuracy at all. The supplement has 100 less important books that can be added, covering stuff such as travel, history, myth, all that stuff, as well as a few intended as pure entertainment, and then you can even add your own. So most of the value of these are between 1 and 6 gold. And then when you go in here, this is just kind of the credits, and then here's your introduction as to what we were just reading. And then when you go into the items, it actually created all this in items. So they made a book for every single book. There's 100 of them. That's a lot of work. I wouldn't personally want to do that. But what the handy part of this is that you can turn these into parcels. So let's say you have a treasure in the Curse of Strahd and you want them to be able to find one of these books. You can just drag this into your parcel and it makes it that much easier. So that's a really handy thing to have if you want it themed for the adventure and you want to throw one of these in here to kind of help with your story, depending on what it says and what type of book it is. It could also just be random treasure too. So that's kind of neat that they made items out of it. I personally would have taken this list and created a table, because that would be nice to have a random table that calls on one of these items. So if you wanted to generate something, you would have a table. So that's probably about as much as I would do for taking it to the next level, is perhaps making a table or some sort of rollable table where it will generate a stack of books. But other than that, it's pretty neat. So you'd have to take and make a list and then link all these items to the list and then roll on that list, and you decide if it's just going to be a parcel or if it's going to be just for informational purposes, whatever. But I think a table would have been handy at this point, but it didn't probably come that way with the original content, so who knows. But this is kind of neat. So you got like books here. I got a module here. This is from Angela Maps, and these are images, and what this is a wagon map, and I believe this map set is available on the DM's Guild and also on the Fantasy Grounds Forge. But essentially you got this caravan set up here, this map for at night. So this might be handy to replace or to add to an established map within Curse of Strahd. So if you don't like the maps that are already included, you can use something like this. And if you turn these things on, and then you use the line of sight and all that stuff, let me see if she put that on here. So yeah, so this has line of sight on it. So this would work with your party. So let me drag them over, see what this looks like. So if I go to play mode, I'm going to move them all on here. So now as you can see, the line of sight is active and you're able to see around here because it's a campfire. So you could have your players on a map like this and use this in your adventure to sort of embellish it and make it better and a lot easier to run. And maybe this map will work better for you than one of the included maps. So this is a caravan map. It's kind of like a Vistani gypsy caravan type thing. I don't know if I would necessarily put the shadows on there, but it still looks pretty decent, not bad. And let me look and see what else we got. Yeah, this looks pretty decent. I mean, this is not bad at all. And then maybe I would have put some waves on the water. I don't know. But nonetheless, there's your wagons at night. So that's just a map set that I picked up on the... I think I got that one on the Forge. And it's already set up. You don't have to do anything to it if you buy it that way. Here's the Curse of Strahd shops. So this builds off of the Curse of Strahd storyline. This was made by, I think, T-Story or Theodore. But it has parcels that are already set up for all the standard equipment that exists in the adventure, based off of that adventure. And then here's a story entry that kind of gives you different places. So your instructions are: you share the stories listed in the Curse of Strahd shops. All the links in each menu are shared by default, but if you want to make an item unavailable, you just right click and unshare it. This can be used if you need to imply scarcity, that sort of thing. If you need to know where a specific item is listed, you can search through the parcels on the bottom here. And this is just kind of a convenience thing. So if you wanted to provide shops, here you go. So you would share this by right-clicking and go to sharing, share record, and then when they want to buy something, they can pop this up, and then they would drag this to their character sheet. So this is a crystal worth 50 gold. So it has a negative 50 value, and then it has the crystal. So once the player clicks on this, all they have to do is drag the parcel onto their character sheet. So this is Knack Turnbuckle. He is an artificer, and he needs a crystal to complete one of his projects. So he goes to this store in Ravenloft, or in Curse of Strahd, and this is Arasek Stockyard. And in that, he pulls that up and says, well, I need that crystal as a component for one of my projects. So in inventory, he's got only 5 gold. So this doesn't prevent this from going negative, but it does give the GM a way to allow players to shop for items, and it will automatically deduct the gold. So let's go ahead and see what happens. So he's going to drag the crystal parcel, not the item, but the actual parcel, onto his sheet. It adds the crystal, which is right here. He's going to put that in his pouch. But it made it negative 45. So in this case, for role-playing sake and for the sake of the adventure, if it's a one-shot, I'm probably not going to care, but I will mention that he owes the store something. So maybe he'll trade some things of value to cancel out that negative number. Or perhaps he owes the guy a quest. So we'll say that for this crystal and 5 gold, he is able to get the crystal, but he owes the guy a favor, in which he needs to find a certain item or something and bring it back to the store. So you can do something like that to kind of justify going negative. But that's essentially how the stores work. And these are just 2 that are themed for the Curse of Strahd adventure. And you can make your own. It's just a lot of work. So that's just a handy thing I picked up. I think this is on the Forge, the shops, so that makes it easier. Now, if you're going to run the Curse of Strahd and you have like the Death House, there is a script that kind of helps you running the Death House. So there's a Death House script, and then there's escaping the Death House. So essentially what these do is they give you more ideas, and they give you a table of contents, and it kind of helps you make this particular encounter better. And it gives you a lot more context, and it tells you where it's located in the book, and it gives you just more description and more things to use, and it kind of adds to whatever is already there. So for instance, if you're going to run the Curse of Strahd from the actual adventure, let me see if I can pull that up. So here's the Curse of Strahd. If you go to the reference manual and you scroll down to the bottom, there is a section here that talks about the actual Death House. And this is a kind of your intro adventure. It's optional. You don't have to run it. But what it does is it gives you something to kind of get the people used to the setting, and that's in this appendix. And this gives you an idea of what the Death House is. There's a link that talks about the creeping fog. And then when you hit this next entry, it goes into this is the official content. It shows you where the death house is, and then it gives you an idea of here's the haunted house. I believe it's this E7. Yeah, this is the death house. So that's in the town. So when you're using that, you kind of have a vague outline. You kind of have a little bit of a story here on its features and how it's laid out. It's even got details on there. It's got its own map. So it's kind of good, but when you go into using the adventure, there may not be quite enough of what you need to run this. So it just depends on what your needs are, if you're experienced or not. But the script gives you more ideas and information on how to run this first encounter. That's kind of what it was set up for, and it's kind of like a supplement to that particular encounter in that world. There's some monster loot of Curse of Strahd. So what this does is it adds the parcels from every encounter type or creature type or NPC in the game. So if you come across ghouls or ghosts, there's phantom dust, spirit cloth, and a vial of ectoplasm that can be harvested. Or if you come across a dead commoner, they might have a broken club on them. Or a gargoyle, you might be able to harvest a chunk of earth and magic pebble. So it just depends on what your needs are, but this helps when you have people who want to harvest or they want every little bit of treasure they can from an encounter. So these add that. So here you have a cat hide and 1 day's worth of ration if you're into eating cats. There's a bandit, so you have broken leather armor and a broken scimitar, so you might be able to sell that for scrap value. Here's a Barovian witch, so you get a spell book and a broken dagger. So there's just all kinds of really cool little supplements that you can get online or from the DM's Guild or from the Fantasy Grounds Forge. So it just depends on what you need and what the kinds of things you want to do. So here's Strahd's Dark Servants. And what this is basically just different things that you can use to help embellish the information. Here's the coachman, the glum coachman. He's probably the one that's riding the horse. He's got a whip. He's got some abilities. Tells you about Igor and how he was born in Vallaki and some information about him. And then there's the Black Carriage. It's an NPC construct, basically, and it gives you the stats for that, like a vehicle, so you can overrun things. There's different things that you can use that will help you with your game. Here's a pickled zombie. Strahd keeps one of his zombies stored away in a barrel of wine. Not only does it give the wine a unique and quite deadly taste, it also preserves the undead flesh. So these are just really cool little embellishments that someone decided to create. So this was also on the DM's Guild. And then, of course, you have the Sirenscape modules. So one for the Curse of Strahd, and then one for the Monster Manual, and then one for the Player's Handbook. So when you're executing attacks or you reach a certain point in the adventure, you have options to trigger audio. So you have that too. And then I also have a few character creation books open for content creation, but honestly, once the characters are built and everything's in place, you can unload quite a bit of this. Like, I probably don't need the monster manual. You can probably use this book thing occasionally. There's some sidekicks. I think this was put out by Grim Press, but essentially you get all these little sidekick NPCs in case you want them to join your party. So these are from different parts in the adventure. So you might want to use these guys in your adventure or as NPCs. And basically it kind of gives you an outline of what the stuff is and what it might be used for. And these are all themed and keyed around the adventure. So you may want to use this as part of your thing. And then here's some extraordinary features for the mongrel folk. And so there's all kinds of really cool stuff available if you want to go the extra mile and add all this complications to your table. It can make it very fun, but it also can add way too much stuff. So it just depends on what your needs are. But these are just things that you'll come across as you get familiar with the actual adventures and the platform. And then once you get a grasp on the basics and how everything is kind of connected and how the rule set interfaces with Fantasy Grounds, it gets a lot easier. And you can have a lot more fun. You won't be, struggling as much trying to find where stuff is and trying to figure out what to do with this and that. So there's all kinds of opportunities for learning and growth in this platform. And even though I've been using it for about 7 or 8 years, I still don't know half of the stuff that it does. I mean, it's just endless. There's just tons of things that you can do with it. There's some options that you could do it 3 different ways. I mean, it's just endless. But if you're willing to put the time in and to actually use the platform the way it was designed and not get bogged down by too many extensions and too much content, it can really be a lot of fun, and it can really help your storytelling. Like I said, if you don't put enough time into it, it's almost pointless. I mean, it's kind of like you just go out and buy a bunch of stuff and never use it. So I'm kind of guilty of that. I have tons of maps and tokens and stuff I'd probably never use, but I will try my best to show them and to share what you can do with them, and then also I might be able to have an opportunity to use it in a one-shot or in a campaign. But essentially, it's like a hobby for me. I just collect the stuff and hope for the best. But anyways, happy Halloween, everyone. You have a good week. Hopefully you're going to a Halloween party, or you have tomorrow off. If you have to take your kids out, maybe you have Wednesday off too. But anyways, take care. See you around, and happy gaming, folks.